Hello, this is Sarah Spector representing the book publishing company. And I'm here with Sally Roesch Wagner. So honored to be in her company.
Thank you, Sarah.
You're welcome. And we are going to be talking about her very important book, Sisters in Spirit, which I've just finished. I believe you have a large compendium of books that you've written. This is the one that I've just taken notes on. So thank you for being here with me. And would you like to start by telling me a little bit about your background and how you have come to write these important books, the two that are in the background, Sisters in Spirit and We Want Equal Rights, which is a young people's book, the second one?
Well, I grew up in Aberdeen, South Dakota, and I grew up in a community that, as far as I knew, was homogeneous. It was all white people, as far as I knew, and it was, there was a lack of diversity in every way. Part of it was because it was the 50s, and part of it was because it really did have a lack of diversity. So that is really the disability that I've had to overcome and continue to work to overcome culturally. I think, first of all, I should identify myself as a recovering racist. It is one day at a time. It is the knowledge and the recognition that I live with privilege that I don't even recognize with every breath I take. Every part of my life, I live with white privilege. And that recognition begins my process. The other thing is that I have to say that I approach talking about my writing about the Haudenosaunee, the Iroquois, as the French called them, with trepidation, because I first got an idea that there was something going on here between the women's suffrage movement and Native Americans, with Matilda Jocelyn Gage's major work, Woman, Church, and State. I'm the, full disclosure, I'm the founder and the executive director of the Matilda Jocelyn Gage Foundation. But very quickly into this 550-page book, Matilda Jocelyn Gage says, startlingly, never was justice more perfect, never was civilization higher. And she's talking about the Haudenosaunee. Well, I skipped over this for years because it was sort of, I didn't realize, again, the depth of my racism. What probably was going through my mind was, these are Indians. What do they have to teach white women anyway? That kind of recognition of the depth of my racism poisoning my scholarship was the way in which I entered into trying to find out who were these Iroquois anyway, and are there any still around, and what the heck is she talking about? That was my starting place. What I realized when I recognized that I had missed a statement so startlingly important for probably 15 years as the primary scholar of Matilda Jocelyn Gage. If somebody says, never was justice more perfect, never was civilization higher, aren't you going to go after that? I didn't. So what I began this process with was the idea that, first of all, I was likely to get it wrong. And second of all, I was likely to do damage. So I stepped into my research first, totally primary sources. I didn't want to read what anybody was saying about them in the white world. I wanted to read what was going on during Matilda Jocelyn Gage's time, and most importantly, what were Native people and our Native people saying about themselves, Haudenosaunee. When I found the writings of Ray Fadden, who book publishing has so smartly republished, I felt like I was on solid ground. I made a decision that I would not publish anything unless or until Native people asked me to publish it. And that meant that I went a long time doing this research, years, and I was asked to do a paper at a conference in SUNY Plattsburgh. It was sometime in the 1980s. And I did a paper preliminary on the Haudenosaunee influence on women's rights, following Matilda Jocelyn Gage and all the research that I'd done. And I said, I think about this writing as, or this research as being in a teenager stage. You know, I don't know if I'm on the right path or not. And I really would welcome feedback. Well, John Fadden was in the audience, and I had
John or Ray?
No, it was John. Ray's
Oh,
son
okay.
was in the audience, and I was introduced to him before the event, and he he said, "Oh, you're that woman who commutes to Onondaga from California." And he apparently had heard about me, maybe from Ray or some of the women at Onondaga that I'd been in touch with and spent time with. Anyway, it was really important to me that he was there. And I thought, I most of all want his feedback. And I'm going to watch for that. And if appropriate, I'll ask for it. I finished my paper, and John Fadden got up and walked out of the room. And I remember I had my notes for the talk in a manila envelope or a manila file folder. And I remember closing it and thinking, I just got my answer. I won't go any further with this. And I felt sadness, but I also felt he had, in a very respectful way, told me that I shouldn't go any further. Some other people came up and, you know, they were saying positive things, but it was, no, I got my answer. And I was just getting ready to leave, and John walked back in. And John said words that changed the whole direction of my life. John said, "You made me so happy with what you said." John didn't say you were right. John didn't say it was good. John said, "You made me so happy with what you said." And it was the opening. He asked for some of my cards. He said, "I'd really like to put you in touch with some folks." And so I gave him a bunch of my business cards. And the next thing I knew, I got an email from Doug George, who was publishing Akwesasne Notes at that time, asking if they could reprint my paper. And that was the very first thing I published. It was, I was asked now, I could publish. And then the next thing I published was in North American Indian Quarterly that came out of Cornell. And so by that time I thought, I think I'm ready to do something more. And during 98, which was the 75th anniversary of the Seneca Falls Convention, it I did an exhibit on the Haudenosaunee influence on women's rights. And I also was asked to do and did some curriculum material for Women's Rights National Historic Park on the Haudenosaunee influence. That all led to, this is a very long story leading up to Sisters in Spirit. And it was to find a publisher. Well, I'm going to be honest with you. I was not going to publish with what I came to think of as the trolls. And these were the white scholars that were really the recognized authorities on the Haudenosaunee. And we called them trolls because they sat underneath the bridge of cultural connection and took pot shots at anybody who tried to cross over. And so that eliminated some publishers that I would not put my book on the shelves with theirs. And then I'm trying to think how, I wonder how I got connected with book publishing, and Native Voices. I know my friend Jeannie Shenandoah from the Onondaga Nation knew Anna Mae because she was a midwife.
Anna Mae, yeah.
And she'd done, the famous midwife from the farm.
Sure.
Jeannie put her seal of approval on the publishing, book publishing. So every word of Sisters in Spirit was read by a friend consultant from the Onondaga Nation for cultural appropriateness. And I also, I said, if the women at Onondaga think that this book shouldn't be out, I need you to know that I'm going to have to pull it. And it was extraordinary to me, the acceptance of that and the willingness of the publishers to do that. So I felt like I was in very good hands. And then the joy of joys was that I asked for and got permission to begin the work with the words of Ray Fadden and ending the book with the words of Ray Fadden. And in between is John Fadden's art.
Yeah.
And when we were trying to find a cover for the book, John Fadden's son stepped up. And the thing I think I feel most proud of is that that book is embedded with 3 generations of the Fadden family.
Yeah, and Ray's words are so beautiful and so moving. I copied them down for myself, not even for the purpose of this interview. Well, thanks for that background. I took so many notes on the book. Things like, well, here's one thing that stands out, the way Elizabeth Cady Stanton, of course, a famous woman suffragist, really valued, I think you wrote, well, valued women's divinity and also their women's creative powers as homemakers, and felt that our creative powers as homemakers were part of creating and maintaining life. And that really, it stands out for me, and it gives me chills actually, because of I guess because of the obvious, which is how much it's been, I think probably, I'm sure it continues to be devalued in our crazy upside down mixed up culture.
Yeah.
And let's see, there's so much in the book to talk about.
You know, that is one thing that I'm still in the process of um, of trying to get my mind around. Is I think that was very, very indigenous influenced, and here's why. I'm non-native. I'm going to give you the best shot I can at this, but I'm not the authority. But my understanding is, as well as I understand it at this point in my life, for the Haudenosaunee and other traditional indigenous people, the connection between women and Mother Earth is one and the same. And I mean, if you break down existence to its basic, it's who creates life? It's women, and it's Mother Earth who gives us everything that we need to sustain ourselves. And the devaluing of Mother Earth and the devaluing of women is at the heart of Western Christian culture. I'm convinced of that. And that unless we turn ourselves around and learn from indigenous people, we're on the road to the end of life on this planet. And we know how close we are now. You know, we've crossed over. We've known that for a couple of weeks now. We've crossed over. The only thing we can do now is to mitigate. And that means we've got to change not just the way we behave, but the way we think. Our value system, our spiritual foundation has to be not in heaven, but on the earth.
Mhm.
That's where sacredness resides.
Mhm.
Anyway.
Maybe instead of talking about how, in quotes, civilizing the native people, civilizing as done by the white, I'll call it the white interfering imperialist culture, destroyed or interfered with them, maybe I should just talk more positively about the Haudenosaunee and the native cultures. Things like a chief needed to prove that he was a dependable family man through 7 generations, because it would show that he was representing the needs of the people. And a woman could not only, I think it was the women who chose the chiefs.
It was the clan mother. The clan mother had the responsibility. And the way it's always been explained to me is that this isn't a right, this is a responsibility. In a balance of authority, a balance of responsibility, the chief and the clan mother work together. But because the clan mother gave birth to these boys, and she knows in her clan what boy is the one who doesn't put himself forward, the one who really watches to see the needs of other people, the one who has never stolen anything. The chief cannot have committed a murder because it's a peace confederacy. If he's ever been a warrior, he has to step down. And the final thing is he cannot ever have abused a woman or a child. And those are the basic rules, as I understand it, and have had explained to me, that the clan mother must follow. So she looks for a good family man, one who watches out for others, and one whose skin is, say 7 layers thick, because he's going to take a lot of criticism. And he also needs to make all his decisions for the 7th generation. Now, if he loses his way, the clan mother is she's the eyes and the ears of the clan. The chief is the voice, but the voice has to listen to the eyes and the ears because that's who is going to tell him what he should do. And that's the clan mother's responsibility. So if he strays, if he gets off the path and makes a decision that really is not going to be good for 7 generations down the way, she warns him. And if he does it again, he gets a second warning. There's a whole protocol that goes on with this of who goes with her when she does this. But the third time, the way I've had it described is who goes with her is the man, I think it's called of no mercy. And that's when she has the responsibility to cut off his horns, as Elizabeth Cady Stanton described it. And what it is that she has the position of the chief is hers because it's her responsibility to nominate and hold him in office and remove him if necessary. So when she condoled him, she put the symbol of his authority on his head, literally. And so if he has strayed for a third time, she has to remove that and remove him from his position. And he then is really in a position of being shunned. I mean, he has showed himself not to be an appropriate leader.
Mhm.
And so it's, to a white feminist like me, initially that looked like, whoa, she has all this power. And I remember, and I think I talk about it in the book, when one of the clan mothers from Onondaga and I did a talk at the annual Elizabeth Cady Stanton birthday tea. And I did Stanton's quote about the clan mother had the right to cut off the horns. Man, that feminist audience went wild. And then Audrey got up and just very quietly and in her way said, one of the responsibilities I have is to remove the chief. I have never done it. It would be the saddest day of my life because it would mean we are so out of balance. And afterwards, Audrey and I were talking about what's the difference between rights and responsibilities. Because I said, I always talk about rights and you talk about responsibilities. And what we came up with is that rights are what you talk about in their absence. Responsibilities are what you have when you have created gender balance, a balance of authority between the responsibilities of men and the responsibilities of women. And, the amazing thing in that whole system is that there's a very sacred space for two spirits. It looks like a really gendered system, but it's fluid at the same time because one chooses which gender they will work with or be with, which gender they are.
Mhm.
So it's an amazing system.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
And as hard as the churches and the government tried to destroy it, and you think about the power of kidnapping those children and holding them in what one Haudenosaunee friend calls concentration camps. Boarding schools doesn't capture what was going on. They were concentration camps. You were not allowed to leave. You were held in military position, and you never learned to love, and you never learned, taking kids when they're a couple years old and not releasing them until they're 18, the post-traumatic stress. Recently seeing all those dead bodies that were found in Canada, that's the tip of the iceberg in the United States. We don't even know yet the depth of the destruction that was wrought by those concentration camps that were done by the churches, primarily by the churches, with funding from the government. You will kill the Indian to save the man. You will create cultural genocide in order to end their lives. The amazing thing is that the churches and the government were not able to succeed. The resurgence, the renaissance of native sovereignty and culture is one of the most hopeful signs I see in the world today. The resilience.
And since you've brought that up, the last note I took in the book was by Elizabeth Cady Stanton, and she, of course, was one of the heroic suffragists who said, "As history is said to repeat itself, we have every reason to believe that our turn will come again." I mean, like in the face of having been beaten down through how many decades, not to speak of millennia.
And I think for me, the double meaning, although I don't think that Elizabeth Cady Stanton's racism would have allowed her to see it at the time, but I think for us today, the recognition that we're gaining that the leadership really has to come from those who understand the oppression the greatest. It needs not to come from white women like us. It needs to come from Native women. It needs to come from women who speak from a level of understanding of the intersectionality of oppression. And that's really exciting to me, to see the voices of Indigenous women rising, see the voices of Black and Indigenous and women of color. And, the publishing company is doing a real service to the world in the books that you're printing, I think, in that regard.
Let's see, moving towards winding up. I mean, things like, let's see, I'm trying to choose what to read. This is a quote by a man who was a trader and who lived with the Onondaga and Oneida for 25 years and was adopted into the Onondaga Nation, and wrote, "The Indians have no altercations, and that in 10 years I have not heard any angry expression nor seen any degree of passion. They treated their women with respect, even tenderness. They used no ardent spirits. They settled differences amicably, raised wheat and corn in considerable quantities, and also apples." Just an example of one of the amazing things.
And the process of the good mind, and again, as an outsider, I can only say it as best I understand it, but my understanding is the goal is that we can choose whether we're going to live in negative thought or live in positive thought, that we can choose what we attend to and how we experience ourselves in the world. And the good mind allows us to find the best place in ourselves. The condolence ceremony, before begin a process, the wiping away of the tears, we know you've come from a long distance and you've experienced things that made you sad. So before we begin, I wipe your tears. I give you something to drink to clear your throat. I clear your eyes and your ears so you can hear. The Thanksgiving, before we begin, we orient ourselves to we give thanks to every relative, to all life, one by one by one. And once we understand ourselves, that we are all related, then we're able to make different decisions. Those kinds of ceremonies are, they're absolutely brilliant, and they're sustainable. they lead to a sustainable world, not the unsustainable world that our Christian capitalist world has created in the West.
That's beautiful. I think I actually wrote down the Mohawk version of what you just talked about, the Thanksgiving ceremony, if I can find it. I hope I wrote it down. Well, anyway, maybe I can't do any better than, oh, here it is. It's the Mohawk version of the Haudenosaunee Thanksgiving address. We give greetings and thanks to our mother, the earth. She gives us that which makes us strong and healthy. We are grateful that she continues to perform her duties as she was instructed. The women and Mother Earth are one, givers of life. We are her color, her flesh, and her roots. Now our minds are one.
Now our minds are one.
And I know, and I think some of those ceremonies might have gone on for 4 hours or.
Yeah, that's the beginning.
Yeah.
But it's when you thank every living, and you thank the wind, you thank the stars, you thank, and you are then oriented in a sustainable and a real way to the rest of the world. And I think the difference starting, when I'm in a process where we begin with the Thanksgiving, I find myself having different thoughts than if I come into a meeting with a bunch of white people and it's like, okay, here's the agenda. It's like, it's coming from here. But with the other, it's like I'm situated in the world in a way that I make better decisions.
Well, I'm so honored to speak with you, and I can't wait. I can't wait to read the rest of your books. I really mean that. There's so much more to say. Let's see. Maybe there's no point in adding to what you've said because you speak very well. But thank you so much, Sally Roesch Wagner, for joining me to talk about Sisters in Spirit and We Want Equal Rights, which can be seen behind you, is also an extremely enjoyable read for younger people. And I hope we get to speak again, and can't wait to read the rest of your books. And thank you so for joining me today. And
thank you, Sarah.
Thank you for your work. It's such a privilege to be able to talk to someone who's given so much to, I don't know how to say it, who's acted as such a bridge between the cultures and who is bringing us such valuable information. Thank you.
Well, thank you.